Joining me now exclusively this morning with his first public reaction since the affidavit was unsealed is the ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee, Congressman Mike Turner. Congressman, thanks very much for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
I want to ask you about the affidavit. We just showed all of the redactments on that document. What do you react? How do you react to that? And do we know what these classified documents are in relation to?
Well, Maria, I think this is what's interesting about the affidavit. Even absent the redactions, what's missing in the allegations are that there's some imminent national security threat that would justify raiding the president's home. Former President Trump's home was raided, which is the most invasive manner in which the FBI could have gone about this. The Department of Justice could have had other options. They could have gone to court and tried to have the subpoena that they had enforced by the court. Instead, they chose to raid Mar-a-Lago. In the affidavit itself, they cite the archivist. They don't cite the intelligence community. They don't cite the director of CIA, Department of Defense, or even the director of national intelligence as opining that these documents or this situation is a national security threat. They cite the archivist. So this sounds more like a bookkeeping issue than it is of a national security threat, which means it doesn't rise to the level of justifying raiding the former president's home.
So, in other words, the FBI did not ask the intelligence community for any assessment. I know that you notified Avril Haines, and you did get a note back from Avril Haines, the director of national intelligence. We have that letter here. And what this says is that they were unaware of it before this, and the director of national intelligence not aware. So the FBI did not ask the intelligence community at all about these documents before pulling off this raid.
Maria, it certainly appears that. When you look at Director Haynes' letter, she says, we'll begin the process. We'll begin to look at these records. And she cites both the records that had been surrendered by President Trump voluntarily and those that were taken in the raid itself. So clearly, she's saying they've not looked at these. They'll go look at them. We'll do an assessment. Well, that means that the FBI is flying alone here. Supposedly, they're looking for classified documents, but they're not talking to anybody who deals with classified information. And that would seem to indicate that this is very, very suspect as to why it would rise to the level of needing to raid. They had other options. They should have taken them.
Well, I mean, look, we go back and look at the Russia collusion lie that the FBI knew that the dossier was fake, and yet they still pushed forward trying to get warrants, FISA warrants, to spy on the Trump campaign, and that's exactly what they did. They spied on Carter Page for a year, and no charges were ever brought. What do you make of what the Director of National Intelligence may say in this briefing? First, tell us the timing. When do you expect to get a briefing from the DNI? When do you expect to get an assessment of all of this?
Well, they'll have to review the documents first before they come to Congress to brief us, which is the mystery part of this. Why haven't they been involved previously? There was another win also in court this weekend, Maria, and that is that former President Trump won in federal court. At least the court saying they have an initial intent to award a special master authority to go over these documents and to return to former President Trump those items that should not have been taken from his home, and also demanding that there be a more inclusive accounting of what was taken. Because, as you know, when they released supposedly their inventory, for example, his passports weren't there. So there's a number of items that we don't even know that they've taken. This went in court of the court saying their preliminary intent is to grant this special master really does show, once again, a court being very skeptical of what the FBI and the Department of Justice is doing.
Wow, but how aggressive. They also raided the home of the head of Project Veritas because Project Veritas had their hands on the diary of Joe Biden's daughter. I mean, what is going on at the FBI?
You know, that certainly is another curious one, because that certainly doesn't rise to the level of any national security threat. This is, a diary, which, of course, certainly would be embarrassing to President Biden, embarrassing to his daughter. Certainly now we're learning that, the allegations that the diary itself had been stolen. But to go all the way to the level of not just subpoenaing the documents, but to raid a media outlet over this, again, is very, unprecedented. And it's a line that we've just not seen crossed before.
Meanwhile, when you take a look at what the FBI said about the capture of Zawahiri, let's talk about that for a moment, because we saw that they went out on TV and said that they were tracking the family. They declassified those documents. So how does that jive with this situation?
Well, that's really interesting, Maria, because if you look at what Director Haynes has said, the director of DNI, that she's going to review these documents and tell us what the risk would be if these documents were released. You can certainly identify any threat to national security with any information that's released. With Zawahiri here, the President Biden's administration released information about how he was found, how he was tracked, and how he was killed, all of which makes it more difficult for us to do those things in the future. And the payoff for them was really just bragging, as they were claiming credit for what had occurred. That certainly diminishes overall national security. So in all, we're going to be very, as we look at these statements that we're going to get from the director, as we look at these documents, and I've called for all the documents to be given to the Intelligence Committee so we can review them themselves. We have to be very cautious as we go through this process. There's a lot more to learn. I certainly think that the court's order to initially indicate that they have the inclination to issue a special master for the president, so President Trump's documents would go to the special master for review and for disposition. I think that certainly helps the former president.
Well, were these documents declassified?
Well, President Trump says they are. Certainly, Kash Patel has said they are. This is going to be a fact-based issue. Certainly, there's going to have to be some substantiation of this. But along the way, it's not. No one is questioning that President Trump had full authority to do that as president. The question is going to be, how can they document that it occurred?
So who directed the FBI then? Who is in charge here? Is this the same group that oversaw Crossfire Hurricane and the efforts to take Trump down during the campaign over a lie being collusion? Do we know who directed the FBI to do this raid?
Well, Maria, that's what's going to be so important about this upcoming election in November. If the Republicans win the House, obviously, with that, that's going to include the investigatory powers that we're going to need to get to the bottom of this. We need to know who's directing these things at the FBI. Who decided to not use other options to obtain these documents and to raid former President Trump's home? Who decided to go to the media and say that there's disinformation from Russia coming out in the election? Stop reporting on these issues that might be damaging to then candidate Biden. All of these things that we're seeing, they're coming from somewhere, and we need to get to the bottom of who is this and how do we root this out of the FBI so that we can get back to an organization, institution that we trust.
And we're going to talk with Senator Ron Johnson about that as well, because he's had conversations with whistleblowers. Before you go, Congressman, I've got to get your take on China, because now we've got news this weekend that the U.S. Coast Guard was denied entry into the Solomon Islands port, sparking concerns that China is running the region over there. It's in charge, saying that they own the South China Sea. What's your take on the threat of China?
This is very concerning because, Maria, this is a very provocative act. This is not just having an alliance with China. This is actually trying to impact us. We were coming back, according to reports, from an exercise that even included participation of the Solomon Islands themselves. So this provocative act certainly raises the bar. We've not seen this before within the area, and this is very concerning.
Okay, final question here on the Trump situation. Do you think Trump is going to get indicted? Are they going to go that far to stop him from running in 2024?
Maria, one of the things that I think is very concerning to everybody, besides just questions about the FBI's actions and the Department of Justice overreach, is this issue of unequal application of the law. It would be incredibly unusual for the Department of Justice to decide, when they didn't pursue former FBI Director Comey, when they didn't pursue Hillary Clinton, who had classified documents in her home with Bill Clinton, former president, to pursue President Trump over an issue with the archivist. So I think that's what's going to be very important about the special master being appointed. I think this is a big win for former President Trump if this court follows through, because this will give him an opportunity for the court, not just the Department of Justice, to take control of these documents and their final disposition.
Congressman, it's great to have you this morning.